Please welcome Patty Martin, our President and CEO of BioCrossroads.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be talking about an emerging sector in the life sciences, radiopharmaceuticals, and we are thrilled to have guest speakers from Cardinal Health, Telix Pharmaceuticals, and Purdue University join us today. As a quick reminder, we ask you to please send your questions to the chat feature, and we will do our best to make sure that we get to those questions. And we really appreciate everyone joining today. We have over close to 200 people joining us today. So thank you so very much. I'd like now to introduce you to my colleague, Brian Stemme, who is our Senior Vice President of External Engagement. And Brian is going to lead us through the discussion today. He's put a lot of time into this particular program. And I want to thank him and the staff that's making everything work for us today, bringing this together. And I just go ahead and hand it over to Brian. Thanks, Brian.
Well, good morning. I appreciate all of our guests being here today. Excited to hear from them. As Patty said, we're going to be talking about an emerging area of strength for the Indianapolis area and the broader Indiana state of Indiana in radiopharmaceuticals. I'm going to take a few minutes to walk you through what's going on in Indiana, and then we're going to transition to some fantastic speakers, as Patty had noted. So next slide, please. And next slide. So simply put, radiopharmaceuticals are a new technology that have been developed to treat cancer. And specifically, what's been done is that companies have developed radioactive molecules, in this case, radioisotopes, that are connected to either a protein or a small molecule that enables them to specifically target cancer cells. And what's interesting about this is it's much less toxic than radiation or chemotherapy. So it's very positive for the patient. And in clinical trials, there's been excellent results with several of these compounds. And I think there's actually two compounds that are currently on the market. There are 30 or 40 venture capital backed companies around the world that are testing new types of radioactive compounds, new types of targeting molecules to ensure that they are finding interesting combinations that can treat different types of cancer and different types of tumors. That's an exciting area. And I guess I would also say that there are large companies that are pursuing these areas like Novartis and others. So next slide, please. This is a timeline of how the industry has begun to grow in Indianapolis. And specifically, it's started out with manufacturing sites that are heavily tied to logistics. We'll talk about that in a second. As those companies have grown their manufacturing capabilities, other companies have followed their lead coming into the region. And after that, we've even had several acquisitions where companies had come in to acquire existing companies' IP or their manufacturing capabilities. And so you'll see we've had a significant number of companies that have been opening and creating facilities in the last 5 or 6 years. And what's exciting, two things that I highlight is one, the number of large companies, globally traded companies that have come in. We have Cardinal Health, we have Novartis, Point Biopharma from Canada is going public via a SPAC, and Curium is a French company that is prominent in the radioisotope business. So again, we've got a significant number of large companies in those. The final thing is the number of ones that are from overseas. Nuclear medicine is more widely utilized in Europe and Australia and Asia. And you see the companies labeled here with an asterisk that have come into the region to, again, leverage some of those strengths that Indianapolis has. Next slide, please. This is a small schematic of why Indianapolis is strong in this area. What I would highlight first is the bottom gray box. Indiana has a great location, being centrally located. Radiopharmaceuticals are time sensitive to deliver to patients. So therefore, having a great airport, centrally located with a FedEx hub that can handle radioactive materials really gives us a strategic advantage over other regions in this area. If we look at the activity going on at our universities, I would say especially Purdue, given their nuclear pharmacists and the radiochemists that they're training. So you add a great location with logistical advantages to talent being produced in the region. Add to that a supply chain that is built up over time with different manufacturers and companies doing product development, moving those through to the end where they're actually selling commercial products. And we have Cardinal today, which is going to be talking about that as well as other trends. So the final thing I would say is that a company we're familiar with, very familiar with, Eli Lilly and Company, is actually selling imaging agents as opposed to therapeutics. But since they are similar technologies and they're out there, we wanted to make sure we were highlighting them as a participant in this area. So what I'd like to do is actually get this kicked off and have the experts talk about what's going on with this industry nationally. First, we'd like to have Tiffany Olson. She is the president of Cardinal Health's Nuclear and Precision Health Solutions division. That company is part of Cardinal Health and is headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. She runs that division from the Indianapolis area. So we're excited to have her. And Tiffany, please take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Brian, very much for having me in BioCrossroads. We are at the start of a revolution, and it's taking place right here in Indiana. So our industry, which is the nuclear medicine and molecular imaging industry, it's at a tipping point, and we are starting this brand new S-curve. And the impact of that, well, it's going to be bringing hope. And it brings hope for those today who have cancer, who may not have a lot of choices. So this tipping point S-curve, we're bringing the future. And that's why I'm so excited to be here today. So let me start with who Cardinal is. Next slide, please. We are a Fortune 20 company. We have over $150 billion in revenue. And as you can see, we're global. We're all over the world. But as Brian mentioned, our world headquarters, well, they're just right across the border in Columbus, Ohio. We have two reporting segments that we report out publicly. The first one is medical. And our medical segment, this is where you would find distribution of supplies that would go into hospitals, clinics, laboratories. We also have some products that we manufacture in this segment: wound care, feeding pumps. We do surgical packs, sterile packs. The next segment is the pharmaceutical segment. And this is where our drug and specialty drug distribution companies are. And we distribute for companies like Lilly, like Roche, like Novartis. And this is where my division reports into. Next slide. Before I talk specifically about what I do, I just want to elaborate just a little bit more from what Brian talked to you about radiopharmaceuticals. So it sounds scary, but really it's simply a drug that has a radioactive component to it. And then based on that drug's chemical structure, it carries itself directly to different places in the body that it needs to go. So imagine if your body was made of glass and you weren't feeling good, and you can go into your physician and the physician can actually look inside and see what's going on. Well, that truly is the beauty of nuclear imaging, because unlike an X-ray that's just going to show the structure of the bone, nuclear imaging shows function. It can show blood flow, and it's really quite amazing the detail and the amount of information that physicians can get to be able to help patients. But the one thing that makes radioactive products different than any other drug is that they decay. Next slide. And this is an extremely important piece to understand because it decays at its half-life, and every isotope is a little bit different. So we have products that decay with half-lives of 10 minutes, like N13 ammonia that we use in cardiac studies. 2 hours for our cyclotron products, most of them. And I would say the majority of our products have about a 6-hour half-life. We do have a longer product that we make. We make it for Bayer Pharmaceuticals right off of Guyan Road. It's called Xofigo for prostate cancer. And this has an 11.5 day half-life. So I want to just talk about an example, kind of bring this to life. So if I was actually live and we were all live, I would be handing out $10 bills to everybody in the audience today. Since we're virtual, you'll just have to enjoy it virtually. But let's say that this is my radioactive drug, this $10 bill, and it has a half-life of 10 minutes. Well, after 10 minutes, it's worth half, which we know is $5. Another 10 minutes goes by, and I do have tape right next to me to retape this when we get done. Half is gone, and so on and so forth until the drug is totally gone. It's not usable. So what does that mean? Well, it means we can't stockpile the drug. It means that we need to make it every single day, and that every second matters. As a company, it matters to us from a financial standpoint, but as a patient, it matters because the actual time of delivery, time that it is put into the patient, the time of their procedure is extremely important because you need to get the right level of activity at the right time to the right patient. And we need to do that every single day. All right, so next slide. So I want to tell you more specifically about my division, Nuclear and Precision Health Solutions. So we do about $1 billion in revenue, and we are located in every state. We have over 3,000 employees that work in our division. We develop, we manufacture, we dispense, and we deliver radioactive pharmaceuticals. And they can be a diagnostic, just tell me what's wrong, or they can be a therapeutic, help to fix what's wrong. Now, we don't do discovery, so we leave that up to the academics and the researchers who do an absolute fabulous job. But we do get involved in R&D, not in the research part. We don't do the research, but we get involved in that big D, the development. And this is where we help to work with our partners. And we partner with companies in our brand new Center for Theranostics Advancement. And I'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But this is where we help to develop products. We provide clinical trial support, and we also do manufacturing. We also manufacture our own products, and we manufacture several of them in one of our 30 PET manufacturing sites. Now, PET stands for positron emission tomography. And at our sites, we manufacture these products on our cyclotron. So a cyclotron is just like a huge magnet that spins. And they come in all different sizes. The size that we have, they're about the size of an SUV. And what it does is it accelerates charged particles into high energy. Then we take that energy and we deliver it to one of our pharmacies. We have 131 of them located all over the United States. And we use our products, we buy products from other people, and we prepare them. We individualize them. We make it specific to a person, their procedure, their organ, their tissue, the site in the body that it needs to go to. Most of these are in a single dose syringe. Some come in capsules. We do aerosols and also implants. Then we take that and we hand deliver it with our over 1,700 professional delivery people into the doctor, right to the patient. And remarkably, we do this with a greater than 6 sigma level of accuracy, 99.99. And we also provide a 99.6% on-time delivery. So what does that mean? That means within 15 minutes of when that dose needs to be calibrated for the patient, we're there. And we do this every single day, and we do it over 40,000 times a day. 40,000 times a day. That's how many individualized doses we do. And I have to tell you that the Cardinal team is phenomenal. And for those of you that don't know us, I hope you have an opportunity to get to know the team. Next slide. So I wanted to just go into a little bit more of the trends that we're seeing. So as Brian mentioned, and I talked about earlier, we have this rapid growth, and our industry is estimated to more than triple in the next couple of years. So people see this very exciting S-curve and the tipping point, and everybody wants in. You heard Brian talk about the PE firms which are investing. So we see more investments that are being made. Novartis recently bought 2 companies, one of them an Indiana-based company, Endocyte, and they've invested over $6 billion with those 2 acquisitions. We're also seeing customers are end users, where everyone is feeling the pain from COVID. We all know what our hospital systems went through, and they're trying to do more with less, and they've had to change a lot of their procedures. Our industry also had to change some procedures. We are very highly regulated. The NRC, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, regulates us, FDA, USP, boards of pharmacy, DOT, and the guidance does change. So we need to make sure, and anybody working with us needs to make sure, that we have the appropriate experts on the team. When we talk about tripling this industry, we see it occurring in what we call theranostics. So let me define theranostics for you. Next slide. So a theranostic, it's a diagnostic. Again, tell me what's wrong. It's a therapeutic, help to fix it. We individualize it down to the cellular level. It is designed just for you. And it's what we mean when you hear people talk about precision, personalized, companion. They all kind of go together with this theranostics. Now, in our industry, the diagnostic and the therapeutic, it could be combined into the same radiopharmaceutical, or it could be 2 different radio-labeled molecules. So what are we trying to do as Cardinal Health to accommodate this growth and to really help to bring it to market? Well, if you flip to the next slide, I'll go through our brand new Center for Theranostic Advancement. So last year, we received a multi-million-dollar investment to expand in this area, really helping us to accelerate these emerging products. We work with pharmaceutical innovators like Telix, which you're going to hear from next, and we help them bring their new products to market. And we do that in 3 new physical locations on the northwest side of Indianapolis. So first, things can start in our Innovation Center. And there we work on drugs that are phase 0 to phase 2. And we work in a very controlled, regulated environment, but not over-regulated for drugs in that phase. Next, they can move on to the pre-commercial site. And this is where we work on products in phase 3. And we can also do small-scale manufacturing there. And then finally, products graduate into large-scale manufacturing. So this site is fully FDA approved. And in addition to working with pharma partners at these facilities, we then can help them to gain needed regulatory approvals, assist them with their sales and marketing efforts. And very, very importantly, we do the logistics. So just think about all of the logistics and the special considerations that a radioactive drug needs and the speed. And you have to have experts that do this every single day to be able to get the product to patients. So we're able to help across all of these different points in the continuum. And again, it's about delivering the future and hope to patients who need these drugs. So we are making a significant investment here in Indianapolis to build out these facilities. But what you may not know is that we've already been here for many, many years. You want to go to the last slide? So our nuclear presence in Indianapolis, well, you can see on the map, it consists of buildings between Georgetown, Zionsville, and West 62nd. We have a little under 200,000 square feet with room to expand. We have 2 pharmacies that can deliver to anywhere in the world. And in one of our buildings, it's dedicated exclusively to the manufacturing of Xofigo for Bayer Pharmaceuticals. So we partnered with Bayer several years ago to expand their manufacturing, and we are manufactured for them in North America, but also we distribute worldwide Xofigo for them. We'll have greater than 200 people in these buildings altogether, and we're adding over 100 new technical jobs. And we chose Indiana, well, one, because of the fabulous logistical network, being centrally located, the world's 2nd largest FedEx hub, our international airport, and crossroads of America. Our life science manufacturing infrastructure here is wonderful with the critical skill sets, our academic partnerships with Purdue, and you're going to hear from Dr. Weatherman also today. And of course, the business-friendly environment. We worked with the IEDC, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, to help us to expand here. And there are so many ways that we collaborate and have partnerships here. Our relationship with Bernard and Telix and Purdue, and the absolute outstanding program of the nuclear pharmacy program that Dr. Weatherman leads. And of course, opportunities to work with BioCrossroads. So you can see we are all in for Indiana and plan to be here for many, many, many years. Brian, back to you.
Tiffany, we appreciate you providing that overview of Cardinal. You know, when I think about Cardinal's presence in this area, it really is an example of hitting on 3 of our 4 strengths, and even maybe 4 as a region. You know, you look at logistics, life sciences, and advanced manufacturing, and Cardinal Health's division here is hitting on all of those. And so it's exciting to see not only the leverage of what we know we're good at, but also somebody that's growing so fast and leveraging Indiana assets. So we appreciate you covering that, and we look forward to the discussion later on. Next, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Bernard Lambert is the President and Chief Operating Officer of Telix Pharmaceuticals USA. He has significant experience as a radiochemist, both at Zevacor and other companies. And he's going to be here talking a little bit about Telix and its work here in Indianapolis. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bernard. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for the introduction, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to be with you today. Thank you, Tiffany, for that wonderful presentation. It's really great. I have a little bit of time to present what Telix is doing and why we are here in Indiana. And again, it's a pleasure to be with you today. If you can go to the next slide, please, which is not very interesting at this point of time. So you can go for the next one. Thank you very much. So Telix can be defined like a late-stage oncology diagnostics company. Our technology is based on the molecularly targeted radiation. So what does it mean? It means that we are developing products that can deliver radiations to tumor cells. How can we do that? So our technology is based on targeting agent. It could be small molecule, could be peptide, antibody, or fragment of antibody that goes selectively to cancer cells. We chemically attach radioactive isotopes, and based on the type of isotopes that we are selected, could be gallium-68, could be zirconium-89. In that case, we have diagnostic product that can give PET images of the location of the tumor. If we are using different isotopes such as lutetium, iodine, or actinium-225, we can precisely deliver radiation to tumor cells, and eventually those products could be used for therapy. Next slide, please. Thank you. Telix has been founded 5 years ago by Dr. Berenburg and Dr. Andreas Kruger. The company went public on the ASX in Australia in November 2017. Our headquarters is in Melbourne. We have several offices in Australia, but we are also operating remote entities. We have Telix Japan. We just finished the setup of the Asia Pac regions to cover also other jurisdictions, including China. Our presence in Europe is in Belgium. Telix Europe is actually one of the larger groups that we do have within the organization. And last but not least, Telix US, which has been also recently extended to Canada and South America. Our headquarters for Americas is in Indianapolis, and I'm going to give you some information why we are actually in Indiana. Again, Telix is a late-stage oncology company, really driven by some key indications. Prostate cancer imaging and therapy is one of the indications that we are going after. Kidney cancer, very asymptomatic cancer, pretty nasty. We have a technology that we have today in phase 3 for imaging. We are starting a phase 1, phase 2 in therapy. Brain cancer is the third indication that Telix is actively working on. And recently we finished the acquisition of a small company in Europe that gives us access to bone marrow conditioning and specific rare diseases portfolio. Next slide, please. So why in Indiana? So when we decided to create Telix Pharmaceutical, Indiana was for us an obvious choice for several reasons. I will probably say that we have 3 major reasons to be in Indiana today. First, our key partners. Tiffany mentioned that we have a relationship with Cardinal. It's absolutely critical for us working with Cardinal. They're in our backyard. They can provide contract manufacturing services for the Telix portfolio, but also giving access to 130 pharmacies across the United States, which give us a big advantage in terms of delivery. We are also at some extent partner with Novartis, with Point Biopharma, with University of Indiana, and also with Spectrum RX, which is also another contract manufacturing that we are using. Key partners are really, one of the most relevant reasons why we are here in Indiana. Tiffany also mentioned that FedEx can offer great logistic solutions. Radiopharmaceutical, it's a very short expiry product. Delivery is everything in our business. The proximity of a logistics center is key. And finally, and I would say last but not least, Indiana gives us access to a wonderful pool of talent, highly educated workforce, and it's really critical for us. Telix is on the stage to recruit around 30 people for the next 6 months in the US, more than 12 just for our headquarters in Indiana. So getting access to key talent is absolutely critical for Telix organization. And Brian, that's it for me today, and back to you.
Thanks, Bernard. As you've seen with the last 2 speakers for the audience here, we've got a company that is invented new products through R&D and is working to commercialize them with a variety of partners, including Cardinal, who has really a service offering of A to Z. So, we've really got a great start here in our discussion, but we really wouldn't be able to foster this level of innovation and this level of growth, frankly, between these 2 companies and others if we didn't have a great source of talent. What I'd like to do now is to introduce Dr. Kara Weatherman from Purdue University. She is the Clinical Associate Professor of Pharmacy Practice at Purdue University College of Pharmacy, really the go-to person for nuclear medicine at Purdue. And she's going to tell us a little bit about the things that Purdue is doing to create a pipeline of people that can support the companies that we've just heard from. Dr. Weatherman?
Thank you. And thank you very much for asking me to be a part of the discussion today. So obviously, as we kind of move through this, we've talked about a lot of the issues related to the use of radioactive materials for the various applications that we're talking about, from research and development all the way through the clinical applications. But one of the major components that obviously we have to think about is how do you get a workforce that actually can help us make the most of these opportunities that we actually have here in Indiana. And so I'm going to touch on that a little bit. And if we can move to the next slide. You know, one of the things that is always interesting to me, so I, by training, I am a pharmacist. I graduated from Purdue's pharmacy program, and I was introduced to nuclear pharmacy through my educational component. And then I actually went out and practiced in this field before I came back and started teaching here at Purdue. And, you know, the moment you say the word nuclear or radioactive to most people, they immediately go to a place where, you know, they're thinking large scale disasters or terrible things, or, you know, Spider-Man getting bit by a radioactive spider. And, you know, it doesn't always have the most positive of connotations in most people's minds. But, you know, we've really spent a lot of time historically trying to point out that there are some very significant benefits to radiation. And really what we're doing in nuclear medicine is taking the best components of that and trying to move it forward in a way that allows our patients eventually to benefit from the parts of radiation that really can help them long-term when it comes to disease and disease states. So as someone who teaches this all the time, you know, this is always the initial point where you have to come in and be able to say, okay, the word radioactive is not as scary as you actually think. And so as we've kind of gone through the last couple of presentations, you know, we've touched on the fact that really what we do is no different than any other area of pharmaceutical manufacturing. We make drugs, we prepare drugs, we sell and dispense drugs, and in our case, we actually deliver drugs to the end user. The unique component of ours is that radioactive addition that we have to think about. And so when it comes to all aspects of this, we have to add this extra level of safety and training to make sure that the folks that are actually manipulating our materials are doing so safely in the whole process. So we've touched on this a little bit. Tiffany touched on this a little bit. We are highly, highly regulated in this area. And so, you know, I've kind of given some of the components here, and we've touched on them in a couple of other places. But, you know, from the fact that we have to deal with radioactive materials, there's a federal layer of oversight in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Environmental Protection Agency is going to be involved. OSHA is going to be involved when we start thinking about our workers and how they're safe in this area where they're going to be either near or in contact with radioactive materials. Obviously, everything that we're talking about is a drug. All of the radiopharmaceuticals that we are looking at, both for diagnostic and therapeutic purposes, go through the same drug approval process as any other pharmaceutical, from early stages when we're doing IND work all the way through to a full new drug application and approval and post-marketing surveillance and things that go on with that. However, as Tiffany mentioned at the very beginning of this, one of our serious issues that we have to think about is the fact that our drugs don't sit around on a shelf for 6 months to undergo testing and to evaluate. We make our stuff just about every day. And so, you know, there are some slight deviations that, for example, someone who's very well versed in the manufacture of a non-radioactive drug, you know, even someone with a lot of expertise in that particular area still has to come back and rethink how we're going to do this in terms of making that drug with a radioactive component. We can't just, throw something on a delivery vehicle and take it from point A to point B because of the radioactive component. So we have Department of Transportation issues that we also have to think about. As we mentioned, we brought up FedEx several times in this discussion. When you have time sensitive and time critical drugs that have to get to their end user in order to be useful, you can't have extensive delays in shipping and extensive delays in paperwork issues and things like that. So, but if you go through and you actually look from the regulatory perspective, we have very clear guidelines in a lot of these areas on what we have to do and how we actually have to do that. I would be remiss if I didn't mention state regulatory agencies. And I know we've alluded to this before, when we are looking at 50 different states in the United States, not to mention any kind of larger scale distribution system, the regulations are not always the same. And so not only do you have to make sure folks are very comfortable with the regulations for their particular location, as you send material from point A to point B, we also have to think about how the regulations in the receiving state are going to kind of differ from what we're dealing with. And so, as we look at what we're talking about here, having a workforce that understands what we're doing in terms of the preparation of these materials is essential, but it has to be much broader than just a localized understanding of the rules and requirements and things like that. And so this is where Purdue tends to come in. So go ahead, next slide. So this, obviously Purdue University, I'm a graduate of Purdue University, so I do have a love of what we do here. So for example, in the College of Pharmacy, the nuclear pharmacy program here at Purdue University, which I have the privilege of leading right now, is one of only about 3 or 4 places in the United States that actually focuses on the training of nuclear pharmacists specifically. And so, all of my students are pharmacy students who have this additional training in the handling and safety around radioactive materials. But we've always kind of looked at this from that perspective. But, when we start moving outward a little bit, Purdue University and our College of Pharmacy spends a lot of time looking at industrial aspects of pharmacy manufacturing and productions and the regulatory side of things. And so, as we are moving forward and watching this incredible change in what we are doing from the development and release of radiopharmaceuticals, so are we trying to make sure that we're ready to face the needs that are being presented as a result of this. So, within our College of Pharmacy, we have several aspects that allow us to look at the broad production perspective, not just the dispensing, which is our nuclear pharmacy program, but the whole aspect. But if you branch outside of our College of Pharmacy, Purdue University has an engineering, their College of Engineering. We have a specialized area in nuclear engineering, which deals with reactor production. And we have a need for folks that understand how to go back to the very basics of how do we actually make the radioactive materials that we're going to use when we actually make these drugs. We didn't really touch totally on that, but right now, all of the radioisotopes that we use in nuclear medicine are actually man-made. So we have to produce those first and then go through and figure out how we're going to incorporate those into our new drugs and kind of move down that pipeline. So our engineering folks have specialty training and specialty aspects in that particular area. We also have in our College of Health Sciences the health physics kind of component that goes along with this. You don't just put radioactive material into people. You put radioactive material into people after you've very thoroughly thought through the process of what that does, not only to the tumor, for example, that we're trying to treat, but to all the other organs in the body as well. And so areas like radiation health physics and medical health physics are key in making sure that we are as effective as possible in treating the disease state that we're trying to treat, while trying to keep our patients safe and making sure that they get only the amount of radiation that they really need to be effective. And so, as we kind of look through Purdue specifically, we have all of these subgroups that all meld together in various aspects. And I think one of the most exciting things for us, now that Indiana is kind of moving into this more focused area of development, is how do we bring all of our folks together? I mean, obviously we all know each other within Purdue University, but how do we bring it together to make sure that we are ready to address this workforce need, and how are we going to be prepared to make sure education and retraining and all of the things that we're going to need our employees to do when they're in these various production and manufacturing aspects, we are well-versed or well-prepared to step into that role very easily as part of what we already do on a day-to-day basis. But I do think it's really important, and I think that's the one thing a lot of people miss, is that it does require very specialized training in order to deal with the radioactive components that are actually going to be tied in here. And I think for a lot of people, this is a very new area for them. Next slide. So basically, as we watch, one of the interesting parts about being in my particular position is we kind of sit back and watch where everything is going. And so, I think when we started discussing this program and things like that, I think a lot of us that work in the nuclear area are kind of sitting back there watching how everything unfolds and watching how everything progresses in this particular area. And I have to admit, being an Indiana girl from the start, who actually was born and raised in Indiana, it is quite the pleasure to see how we've become this centralized area where we're seeing more and more development. But I think the reality of our world is, as I've mentioned, you have to have a workforce that can adapt to and move into this particular area. And so, I think as both Tiffany and Bernard have mentioned, the excitement of moving forward and the potential for new jobs and new employment opportunities within the state is also going to come with training that has to go with that. And obviously these companies are not new to this. They know, and they have training and different components that actually go into this. But Purdue University is definitely very excited about the opportunity to partner with these companies as they're coming into the state and making sure that we are training our workforce to truly meet the needs of the folks that are actually going to hire them and employ them. And so I think looking forward in our particular world from the education side of things, this is one of the most exciting things we've seen in a very long time. I recently attended a meeting, and one of the nuclear medicine physicians that we had presenting actually had mentioned that this is the most exciting time in the nuclear sphere that he's experienced in the last 25 years of work. And so I really think that, as Tiffany and both Bernard have kind of alluded to, this is going to be a very important consideration and a very important area of focus for our state in the very near future, that is going to be expected to continue for quite some time. So hopefully, as we move forward, I think we're going to see a lot more discussion about radioactivity and radioactive materials moving forward. And that's it.
Okay, well, what we're going to do now is move into a panel discussion, and would like to welcome our three panelists. The three speakers, they've been fantastic. Please, in the audience, feel free to use the chat feature to send in questions, and we will try to capture those and respond as we can. This has been a great dialogue so far. I think that when we can think about being national leaders in an industry that's really just coming into its own, that's being fully leveraged, and really there's so much more ahead of us. It's exciting. We have the strategic advantage. We've got smart people. We've got logistics, and we've got a talent pipeline. It's super exciting. So I'm going to kick off with the first question here, and I know we'll have others from the audience. So Tiffany, you did a really great job of describing the new facility that you've started in Indianapolis. And I was curious, I know that you guys are really doing kind of an A to Z. You're providing these services to help early stage and late stage companies. Can you talk about a little bit of the new technologies that you're seeing? Clearly, you opened this facility anticipating new products, new ideas coming down the pike. And I was wondering whether it's new radioisotopes, whether it's new methods of delivery, what are some of the things that you're tracking to be prepared for and as this industry is growing? Just be curious, given all of the companies that are being started around this area.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brian. So we really try to track the industry very, very carefully, looking at what's going on in M&A. New clinical trials are very important as we look at when people start discovering and researching in new areas where those clinical trials are going. And also, of course, always tracking what's going on from a regulatory environment. What we're seeing is we are seeing some new types of isotopes coming in. Actinium-225, zirconium, copper, things that have not traditionally been used very heavily in the industry. We're also seeing different disease states really starting to be get a lot of momentum behind them. Prostate is one of them, as Telix knows. And in neurology, even outside of the oncology area, neurology for Alzheimer's imaging. You mentioned earlier on Lilly with one of their products, and there are a few other products out on the market, one from GE that we manufacture called Visimal. So we're seeing kind of these different types of areas, some of these new isotopes, some of these new disease state, neuroendocrine tumors is one that Novartis recently brought out both a diagnostic and a therapeutic in this area. So we're really starting to see those kind of different things come to light.
Okay, great. Again, more growth in an area where the research and the science is really moving very fast, and the results that they're seeing in clinical trials is just going to generate more activity. So, Bernard, I want to throw it over to you for a second. You had mentioned you're going to be hiring some folks, and I guess let me back up for a second. I want to ask two questions. First of all, you've got a compound that's under phase 3 review, if I remember correctly. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about that product, and then as that moves forward with the FDA, if you could talk about some of the skills of the people you mentioned you'll be hiring as you, I'm assuming, do a product launch. If you could talk a little bit about that molecule and your plans, that would be great. Yeah,
certainly. We have two products that are really on the late stage. One is currently under review by the FDA. This product is actually a perfect fit for Cardinal because it's a radiopharmacy produced compound, and working with company like Cardinal is giving us a big footprint in terms of delivery and patient access. The second product that you are mentioning, Brian, is currently in the phase 3. It's a worldwide study named Zircon. It's for kidney cancer imaging. We are recruiting patients in Europe, in Australia, and in the United States. And actually, we have also a site open in Canada. And Cardinal is also key in this clinical trial because they're making the compounding in a pharmacy, and they when they receive the product that is actually manufactured in Canada, they can make a quick dispensing and deliver the product within the next day in any place in this country. So this is a key. To come back to the second point of your question, Brian, we have a lot of people on the hiring list, including in the office. It's a very large variety of people, radiochemists. It's actually person difficult to find, and we're glad that Purdue University continue to train and educate nuclear technologists and scientists. But it's not the only job description that we are looking at. It's program management, project management, regulatory, quality, manufacturing, marketing, and surprisingly, we have not really relocated a lot of people. We have been very fortunate to find the talent within in Indiana without too much difficulties, which is absolutely great for us.
Great. Okay. Well, for those radiochemists on the line, Bernard's phone line is open. Please give him a call. So,
well, not just for me; it's also for
yes,
and for a lot of those
sure
companies.
Tiffany would welcome calls from radiochemists also. So
That's why we love Purdue.
Actually, transitioning to Purdue for a second, Kara, can you talk about how, as radiopharmaceuticals, if they begin to be as widely adopted as we think they might, and really if they start to kind of mimic what's used in Europe and Australia and other places, how is that going to change the practice of pharmacy? Will it be similar? We just have different volume of activity, or will there be additional things that you'll have to be considering as you train your students?
Yeah, I think, as someone who's based in a pharmacy school, it's always interesting that over the years we've had this battle of here's what we talk about from pharmacy, and then there's the nuclear pharmacy people over here. But now that we're really starting to see where radiopharmaceuticals and the therapeutic side of radiopharmaceuticals kind of come in, we see a lot of feedback on our end from hospital pharmacies who are, separate from nuclear medicine, but still have to understand what's going on in nuclear medicine. And, we have many of these drugs that we're going to be seeing are going to be co-administered with non-radioactive drugs that are going to be needed as, whether it's for radioprotectant effects or different things. And so I think from our perspective, there's going to be these very specialty trained folks, but I think everyone is going to really have to have a better understanding of where these radiopharmaceuticals are going to fit into overall patient care and the therapeutic plans that they're putting together. And so, I think broadly, the practice of pharmacy is going to have to change because this is a very viable treatment option that really hasn't been in existence in the past. From our perspective for the nuclear side of things, we have to remember that our folks are pharmacists. They're not just limited to dispensing and preparing these drugs. One of our kind of running jokes in the College of Pharmacy is a nuclear pharmacist knows 50 drugs really, really well versus a traditional pharmacist that has 50,000 drugs that they may know a little bit about. And, our folks are specialists in their area and they know their drugs very well. So I think as we're starting to see these drugs being used, I think that's another role for our pharmacists to be involved on the clinical side as well. So,
Okay.
it's very exciting for, if you look at traditional pharmacy, we're very focused on the patient care, being involved with the patient. And so I think this is a very new aspect for our nuclear pharmacists as well.
And really just expanding the opportunities for those students is exciting too. We have a question from Bob from our audience. It's directed to the entire panel. Can you share some of the regulatory challenges you face with the FDA and other regulators such as Health Canada? So Tiffany, I'm going to throw this to you first, because I know you're going to be constantly working with regulatory agencies throughout the world. Can you share again some of the challenges that you face keeping these groups happy and keeping them satisfied with that you're staying compliant?
Yes, and let me first just start with Health Canada. So we have worked with Health Canada in getting approval. Our Xofigo site in Minneapolis, actually our first approval was from Health Canada.
Okay.
So we know them very well, and we used to have some of our pharmacies located up in Canada. For us, working with the regulators, it's all about the communication. We work very closely with the NRC. We actually invite them into our quarterly radiation safety meetings. So each quarter they are with us, reviewing our information and partnering with us very, very closely. We find that the education can sometimes go both ways in working together, and especially in doing unique things. So the Xofigo building was the very first alpha manufacturing building in North America, actually in any of the Americas. And so together we worked with the NRC, and it's making sure that your systems are absolutely where they need to be. Your quality system is able to catch things should they happen, and that you've got the culture of quality, that people aren't afraid to speak up and let you know if they see something that's going on. And I know Bernard worked very closely with a lot of these regulators also.
Mm-hmm. Bernard, did you have anything that you'd like to add?
Well, we are not really working close with the NRC, because this is why we are working with Cardinal and other manufacturers. They are dealing with that part of the regulatory. Our interaction is mainly with the FDA. Well, the FDA took a very tough hit this year because of the COVID-19, so they're a little bit behind. They're a little bit disorganized because of the COVID-19, but we are having a lot of interaction with the FDA. We see a lot of support from the different department and division from the FDA in the radiopharmaceutical space in particular. We are having regular discussion with the FDA. It's very proactive. The mission of the FDA is the safety of the drug and the patient access. And as soon as you have a product that can really meet some unmet needs or can create some value for the patients, the FDA is very supportive.
Okay, thank you. Kara, we had a question about the what are the relationships and partnerships that you have throughout the state? Purdue is a land grant institute, has that mission of moving the technology out, and they are very engaged in all of the areas. Can you talk a little bit about some of the, maybe not the companies, maybe it's other folks that you're comfortable talking about, hospitals, pharmacy agencies, pharmaceutical companies? Who are some of the folks, maybe a few examples of the people you work with?
Well, obviously, being one of the sole nuclear pharmacy educational components in the country, we do have very close relationships with all of the major radiopharmacy companies in terms of our students moving through and actually getting out and doing training. We also do training of folks that don't go through a program like Purdue's academic offerings, where we can do kind of what we call postgraduate training and continuing education and all of those different aspects. We are involved in various levels with different manufacturers in terms of research projects. We have several of small scale projects right now that go on kind of more as exploratory things. We also have a nuclear reactor on campus at Purdue, which most people aren't totally aware of, but it's not a big one, but it is one where we can do some very preliminary work, and the folks over there do some isotope development and isotope production to kind of assist in the long-term manufacturing. As the pharmacy school, we have access to almost every hospital in the state of Indiana because our students, not just the nuclear students, but all of our pharmacy students do end up in hospitals throughout the state, many of whom are going to have some level of introduction or exposure to the nuclear medicine department and the diagnostic side of things. But we've tried to position ourselves as the education is our expertise across the board at Purdue University. And just like any of the folks here will tell you, if you have a product and nobody wants the product, then it really isn't useful. So for us, it's very much and I think all of my colleagues across all of the different aspects would agree that, for us, this is our tool. This is our thing that we're providing, and we need to make that available in the form that you want it to be available in. So, if you want specialty training in one area, we figure out how to do that. And so, education, quite honestly, is not a lot different than a item that you would sell for commercial distribution, And so I think sometimes people are very much of the mindset that, we have very, very concrete ways of doing things. But, for most of us here at Purdue, we get into academics because we like the innovation. We like coming up with new things. We like being at the forefront of what's going on. And so, I think for us, we're not limiting ourselves in any way, shape, or form to people we would work with, whether it be consumer, whether it be manufacturer, across the board. I think you would find people at Purdue that would welcome any of those kind of things. But
Well, Kara, this is just a personal opinion. It's always exciting. I know that with that land grant designation and kind of getting the information out, I always think it's exciting. Purdue is always very proactive and very collaborative in working with folks in the state. It sounds like the nuclear pharmacy program is exactly the same. You're out there, you're listening, you're reacting and kind of developing things that are needed by the quote market, the educational market. So that's exciting to hear. Glad to hear that. Again, I'd welcome questions from our audience. Please use the chat feature. We had an interesting question come in from Chris, and it relates to rare diseases. And the question came through and said, as you're developing radiopharmaceuticals, is there a strategy or a potential opportunity to be developing those for rare diseases so that you could qualify for an orphan drug designation? Now, Tiffany, I know you're actually helping companies think through this, so you probably have some guidance on it, some thoughts, and then Bernard, this may be even something that's in your portfolio or strategic plan. So whatever you could share that you're comfortable with, again, can you use radiopharmaceuticals for an orphan drug designation, Tiffany?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
And there are definitely areas and examples where this is occurring and this is already happening. Very exciting. And I think I'll turn it over to Bernard because I believe he probably has more specific examples.
Well, the response is absolutely yes. Radiopharmaceutical cannot be used to treat any kind of tumor. There's some specific kind of tumor that the radiopharmaceutical are never going to make a good job against. This indication like prostate cancer is a very large indication. You can forget the orphan drugs designation. I did mention during my presentation that we have a brain cancer program. It's still a very early stage, but we already qualify as an orphan designation by the FDA because the number of cases are not that high. The radiopharmaceutical definitely have some great opportunity for rare disease, rare cancer, also in pediatric. Surprisingly, there's several products that have good future also in the pediatric use.
Okay, that's great, because I know that rare disease and orphan designation in just what I would consider the traditional small molecule and antibody therapies is so hot, and it's such an area that's being pursued given the some of the reimbursement issues that can be overcome, as well as some of the tax breaks and data exclusivity. So it's exciting to hear that that's actually something that, real world, we've got a good question on that, and it applies to one of our companies here. So kind of looking forward a little bit, can you talk a little bit about, I'd like to know, each of you, what do you think that Indiana can do, stakeholders, universities, state and local government, BioCrossroads, other companies that will be moving into the area, and even regulatory agencies. What are some of the things that you would believe could help continue to provide opportunities for your companies to grow? So please take a few minutes and just let us know what you think. There's a lot of folks on the call here who might have the ability to weigh in on those things, and we'd love to hear your ideas. So,
Great.
Tiffany,
Well, maybe
maybe
I'll start. And there is a question that I want to answer just before this one, and that was from Andy about any restrictions that we have to be able to deliver the product. And the answer is yes. We need to deliver it to someone who has the appropriate regulatory licensing to be able to handle the product. So we can't just, drop it off at the front desk somewhere or give it to someone walking down the hall. And the physician needs to be specifically trained in this area. And so does anyone else in the facility that's going to be handling this. And it does require a special license. We check before we deliver, because the license is specific to a specific drug or isotope at a specific level. So we have to make sure that that level is appropriate to what we're delivering. So there's a whole system in place. We work very closely with new physician clinics that are starting up in this area in oncology that are interested in doing this and what's required. So I just wanted to answer that one, because it is different from what you would normally think. But for us, some of the things that can continue, really the business-friendly environment that Indiana has, and that's with the tax incentives, the growth incentives. But this type of organization where, BioCrossroads is bringing academics and companies and service providers all together. For us, it's the infrastructure of transportation, as you can see, that is so vitally important. So making sure that our roads and our interstates are kept up, that the airport, that FedEx, who I know is expanding out there. You have the Purdue Research Park over there that's also expanding in that area. So something fell. So earthquake in Indiana. So all of those things really coming together and continuing those investments in that area.
Okay, great. Bernard, you've got a probably slightly different perspective, being a little smaller and a little earlier in the process, but are yours similar? Are there other things you would add?
Well, yes and no. Getting our partner close by is really critical. So I would say that everything that the state of Indiana is doing for bringing partner like this, giving them the opportunity to build facility, to get access to logistics, is going to help the company like Telix tremendously, because we cannot make a good job without a full supply chain and logistic in place. Having access to space, well, we are not building a radiopharmaceutical facility on the middle of a highly density population, so we need to get access to space a little bit outside the city, close to the airport, when it's easier to get the permit. For a company like Telix, I've already mentioned that having access to highly educated people is really fundamental for us. We are still a biotech company, right? So we are not making any revenue yet. So having a tax incentive is also helping us tremendously. That's obvious. What we have seen here, it's easy to get access to office space. It's easy to have access to the airport. It's easier to get access to organizations like you, Brian, like organizations that really can really help us to develop the company. And it's also an extremely business-friendly state, which is absolutely fundamental for a company like Telix.
Great, great. Kara, I have to give you the opportunity to weigh in on what can we do to help Purdue, and I suspect I know what might be coming, but I think that whatever we can do to highlight Purdue, what can our stakeholders here in the state do to help you be successful?
Well, I think for us, I mean, obviously we are an institution that is funded through state government. So, staffing and having faculty that can actually support this kind of growth is obviously important for us. And the other thing, though, that is one of my favorite parts about working at Purdue, innovation for us does not just include coming up with a new drug or a new way of marketing it. One of my areas of incredible interest is how do we expand teaching technologies? So we're doing a lot of development work in virtual reality training and, things where we know, and especially after all of the COVID things that we've done, we've learned how to interact in this kind of a forum, but we also want to go under the assumption that, people are not going to be standing next to each other to get training anymore. We're going to have to think of different and innovative ways of doing that. And training can become incredibly expensive, especially for larger organizations where they have multiple sites across multiple states. And so for us, focusing on, advances in technology and the funding and the infrastructure in order to do those kind of things, we think the teaching side is great. We've got that. Now we just need to figure out how to make sure that it's easily accessible to everyone. And, that's a big push at Purdue across all areas, but really we're seeing with nuclear pharmacy specifically, but other areas involving radiation, our students that train with radiation handle radiation. And so, we have to think about the risks of them in the training process as well. So, I think if the infrastructure and the funding for advances in areas like just educational technology and things like that are really going to be beneficial long-term as well.
And Kara, just a quick follow-up for our audience. Purdue, you do continuing education for, or incremental education for pharmacists who may not have gone through a nuclear pharmacy track, but may have an interest in pursuing that area or, learning more about it, whether it's for professional purposes or for just a specific interest.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And we also, lifelong learning is our key phrase, right? You're never stop learning when you get into our field. And, exciting for us, I mean, we used to be kind of in a position where we might get a new drug every year if we were lucky. And, and in the last few years, we're getting 3, 4, 5 drugs that are running through. And I mean, it's not at all like what you'd see in what we call traditional pharmacy, but, obviously there's more and more material coming out, and all of those folks that are already trained need to be brought up to speed, just like all the folks that are coming through the training process. So, we feel that is a huge part of what we do. But I should also mention, we are expanding out into areas that we haven't really dealt with before. So as I mentioned, we have some of our drugs where they're getting infusions of non-radioactive drugs in order to kind of complement what we're doing. So here's a group of nurses, for example, that have never been around radioactivity, but they have to be around this patient that's going to get a 45-minute infusion of radioactive material. How do they handle it? What do they know what to do if they infiltrate the dose? I mean, it just expands out in so many different areas where fundamentally our endpoint, and I think everyone would agree with this, is the patient, right? How does our patient benefit what we do, whether that be teaching about it, whether that be, making it available to our patients, whether it be coming up with new drugs. That's our endpoint, is benefiting our patients. So,
okay. Well, I actually had a question down here, but Kevin in our chat beat me to it. And the question surrounds how can we work with Indiana healthcare organizations to make Indiana a center for radiotherapy treatment? Essentially, how do we have our healthcare delivery system really leverage this industry strength that we're already building? And I'll go ahead and maybe Tiffany, throw that to you, because I know that your experience in working with payers and healthcare systems is extensive.
Yes, so it's a really good question in that it takes all of us that are here to do it, because it takes teaching, understanding, help in knowing what to do, how to keep up with the regulations, what it means, what it doesn't mean, when to use it. So it's really about providing forums that provide education, provide a chance for people to continue to learn, to understand the regulations.
Okay. So the more that we can help educate our healthcare delivery system about the topics you just covered, it sounds like the better. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Bernard, do you have any specific challenges in working with local health organizations? Maybe the right word is not challenges, but are there mechanisms, places that your drug can be utilized? Can it be used at certain hospitals but not at others? Are there things that are challenging that would be useful to you in making sure your products are accessible to patients?
Well, look, those radiopharmaceutical have radioactive isotopes. So yes, it's by definition creates some restriction. The final user need to get a license to have access to those isotopes. Some isotopes are easy to get, some isotopes are more complicated to have. Some states are more restrictive than others. So yes, the first barrier of entry is the license to get those hospital. And then you have also the appetite of the physician to use that technology. It's still today a quite brand new technology. Europe, Australia, they are using those technology since decades. So they have the infrastructure in place, they have the motivation of the physician. Here, well, let's be honest here, it's still quite brand new for a lot of physicians.
Okay.
So it's also what we can do to explain to the physician that those drugs has some value for their patients. That's the second point. The third is the reimbursement policy. It's a pretty complicated landscape in the US. You play with national, with regional, with sub-regional parties for reimbursement that make all that coding and reimbursement quite complex and create some restriction in some states and in some community hospitals.
Okay. Well, I know that we're getting near the end of our questions. I knew that one had come in, Bernard, and the question was, is Telix have any products on the market yet? We talked about there were 2 phase 3 molecules. Are you guys in the commercial market either here in the US or overseas yet?
No, we have a product that is under evaluation by the FDA and by EMA in Europe, including also in a country in South America. No, we do not have any approved product. We have a product that is under review and a product that is on the middle of phase 3.
Okay, great. Well, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and wrap up. First, I'd like to say thank you for your time. We know that all of you are very busy. It was a really fascinating discussion. I've been working on this for a while, and I learned several new things today that I'll probably be following up with you on to get some additional information. So we really appreciate your time. I think this has been a great opportunity to learn something new, and I'm glad that we had such a large audience to listen in. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Jo Beth, and let her wrap up with the final minute or two here.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you so much for our participants and our speakers today. What a great presentation and just discussion and shed some really good light on a topic that we haven't heard a lot about. So really appreciate all the hard work you put into it, Brian, and also the preparation and the work put into it by all of our panelists and speakers. Just a real quick note, if we did not get to all the questions, we will send an email to you directly trying to answer your question, possibly later this week. And then save the date for our upcoming Indiana Life Sciences Summit this September 16th. If you are not following us on Twitter or are not signed up for our newsletter, please just go to our website. That's how you'll keep up to date on the latest Frameworx and event topics that we'll be covering in the coming months. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.